Good morning, Jill. How are you today?
Good. How are you? Good morning.
Fantastic. I just want to welcome you to the podcast and thank you for making time in your schedule to join me. I know you're a busy mom of three. Yes?
Yes, very busy.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah, so we live outside of Nashville, Tennessee, about in Franklin. And yeah, my husband and I have been married since 2009, so 12 years, almost 13. We have three little kids. Jiselle's 7, Genevieve's 4.5, and Bo is 2.
That's a really busy life.
Yes, it is. And we have 2 little dogs. So
Okay. Important. What kind of dogs do you have?
we have Yorkie Chihuahua mixes. They are 5 and 8 pounds, so they're little.
Yeah.
And they'll be 12 this year. So
They live forever. I bet the kids enjoy having the dogs around.
they do. I don't think the dogs feel the same way.
Yeah. A little terrorized. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all good. Well, we're here to talk about your daughter, Jiselle, right, today?
Yes.
Primarily. Can you tell me a little bit about Jiselle?
She is 7. She's in first grade. She has a rare genetic disorder called Rett syndrome, which happens in about 1 in 10,000. Mostly you see it occur in girls, but sometimes it will also happen in boys. It's just more rare. So to me, it's like a spectrum like autism, because some girls and boys are walking and some have better use of their hands than others. And Jiselle is non-mobile, non-verbal, has poor use of her hands. So she's kind of dependent on others to do her daily functions for her or help her do them. However, the thing with Rett syndrome is they're pretty cognitive, or very cognitive, I should say. So she's able to kind of keep up with her peers in her own ways. And she's in a great place where her school helps her along in that journey.
That's really interesting. Is she in mainstream school?
She is. She's in the local public school, which has a great special ed program. So she sits in first grade with all of her peers next to them. She has special seating and stuff like that, but she's integrated in the classroom and gets pulled out for services, and then really just gets pulled out about 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon for reading and math, just because how she communicates is a little bit different than her peers.
Yeah, that was my next question. I was curious how they communicate and then facilitate.
Yeah, so we have an eye gaze device that she's working with. So for those who aren't familiar, it's like an iPad that sits on a stand and has a bar underneath. And so with obviously communication software loaded on it, and she uses her eyes to pick what she wants to say. We're still on the journey of kind of getting her to use it as her primary language, and she's making small improvements, but improvements are improvements. And then she's really great with a yes no board. So I don't think I have it in here, but it's a board that has yes on one side, and actually I do. Sorry. So here's her yes no board. So she'll eye gaze and look at what if you ask her a yes no question. And then we've kind of trained her to stare at us for a yes and look away for a no. So that's mostly how she communicates outside of her body language. Like she'll smile when she's happy and laugh when it's funny, and get sad when she's sad or needs help. So
what kind of or what's the brand, I guess, of the eye gaze system? Just curious.
We have an Accent 1000, a PRC Accent 1000, and we use LAMP as the communication software.
Very familiar to me. I'm well versed. We have the 1400, and we also have stuff. So sounds like we have a similar way of communicating with our kids.
Yes.
Gosh, you can get so far with yes, no. And I think for a long time that deterred us from working on the augmentative communication. But then about okay, like for my son and for your daughter to go function with most people who don't know her, they need that, right?
Yes. I mean, it's very hard because you look at Jiselle, and I think people just assume she can't understand what you're saying. And so I always have to have the conversation, like, presume competence, like she takes in everything you're saying. And even though she's nonverbal, like if you watch her eyes, like she's talking back to you. So totally get that side of it too.
I think that's a perfect phrase to use for most of the parents and kids that we talk about on this podcast is presume competence, because you don't, when kids are nonverbal, you don't ever really completely know how much they're taking in, right? And if you're just assuming they understand everything, I'd much rather err on that side of caution, right?
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree.
Well, and then also I was just curious, when she's in school and it's like a writing task or something where the kids are using their hands, how do they facilitate that?
They do a lot of hand over hand. So she doesn't have complete loss of her hands. She just can't hold on to things very well. So she does a lot of hand over hand. And then we work with an organization called Rett University. So they 100% work with kids who have Rett syndrome and on communication. And so we do that once a week, and they have flip books. So they're starting to teach her how to spell and write using flip books at school.
Okay, cool. Well, let's go back a little bit from where we are now and talk a little bit more about when you guys received her diagnosis, or actually it sounded like there was a big gap in getting her or seeing that there was something going on and then receiving the diagnosis. Can you just walk me through a little?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just preface this by saying with Rett syndrome, everything kind of happens normally and developmentally on track, typically until about 18 months. And then there's a huge regression. So loss of speech, loss of hand movement, loss of movement. So that's just kind of Rett syndrome in a bubble. For us, obviously, we took her home from the hospital. Everything was fine. She was, holding her head up and trying to roll over and all this stuff. And then at 10 months, the pediatrician was concerned because she wasn't standing more independently, like she had no core strength. She wasn't too concerned at that point, but we started physical therapy, obviously, and then things just progressed really slowly. And I think because there was a lack of hitting her milestones on time after 10 months, the pediatrician, and Rett syndrome being rare, it was never like the first thing in the head. It was always like, well, this is just a developmental delay. And so we just kind of like continued on the journey. And then I want to say about like when she turned 3, we started doing more tests and making sure her brain was okay, and meeting with a neurologist and a geneticist and kind of like having that battle a little bit. And then we switched and they wanted to do a full genetic panel. And that's how we discovered that she had Rett syndrome, was her gene mutation. So we kind of went from 10 months to pretty much almost 4, not really knowing what was going on. But kind of in the back of my head, I was like, that's fine. Like for me, like I never wanted her to be labeled so that people put her in a box and said she's not capable of doing things. Because I think once you get a diagnosis and you look at the list of like what they can't do, like, yeah, that's a list of what they can't do, but it doesn't mean that's necessarily applicable to every person who has it. So I guess I grieved early on and just never was like wanting to stick a label on her, if that makes sense.
Definitely. So how did you feel once you got the label? Was it?
I think because I like grieved so early on the process, and I was like, this is what it is. I was fine with it. I was like, well, now we know what it is. We can do some research. There's support out there. There's organizations who kind of like have all encompassing information on this to help families like us. And I was like, yeah, this kind of blows you have a diagnosis, but like, I'm okay with it. Like, this is just our journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything you wish you had known at that time when you got the diagnosis?
No. I mean, I'm kind of this person that just takes things as they come, or I've turned into that person that takes things as they come. And so, no, not really. I know it's weird, but
no, it's your experience. You said you've turned into that kind of person, wasn't because of what happened with your daughter?
I mean, yeah, like I'm very type A, like anything on the Enneagram, I'm a 1, like with the perfectionist, like life was just supposed to be this way. And then obviously you kind of get like a wrench in your journey. And it was early on, it was our first kid. You're like, what are we doing with this child anyway? And then to have an additional challenge added on top of it, I mean, you kind of have to just sit there and be like, what path am I going to choose? Right? Like, I'm just going to go on this journey and see what happens, or I'm going to sit and wallow in my sad and pittiness for the rest of my life because my life didn't turn out how I expected it to.
Mhm.
But I think having her has changed my perspective on how I choose to live my life. I'm not, obviously I'm not perfect, but I'm not perfect in the sense of letting go of my perfectionism either. So there's still that struggle with things too.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated.
It's an evolution.
Yes.
I'd love to hear your favorite favorite memory with Jiselle.
I mean, just her coming home, like giving. So I had complications with my pregnancy. Like, she stopped growing at 32 weeks. And so, which has no correlation to why she has Rett syndrome. But so that was kind of scary. And we didn't really know what was going to happen. And all this stuff just kept being spoken to us. And we had scans 2 or 3 times a week, and then a growth scan every other week until she was born at 38 weeks, which she had to be induced early. And so that was such a whirlwind when your first pregnancy is just kind of like crazy in general, that I was just so happy when she was home, and it felt like we were family and like everything was good and amazing. So
It is a really special, unique thing when the first baby comes home and you've created a family out of nothing. It's beautiful. What do you want people to know about Jiselle?
She's just a special little girl. She's, with all her challenges and her body not working the way she wants it to, she's just so happy and loving, and just, I think she like cherishes life. She's very kind of laid back and easygoing, which we could have had the exact opposite. So I'm so thankful for that, because she really is just kind of like a joy to be around. Especially like when the other two are getting at each other. It's like, oh, you're just so pleasant right now. She's just happy and loving and has an infectious smile and just smart. Everything good about a person is Jiselle to me.
That's so sweet. Do you feel like she has a superpower?
Yeah, I would say her superpower is just, inflicting joy and happiness on people.
I like the way you said it, inflicting. You're taking this whether you want it or not.
Yes, exactly.
Do you feel like you have a greatest lesson from parenting that you could share with us?
Kind of going back to our previous conversation, I think it's just life doesn't go the way that you plan it to. Even with your typically developing kids. And I think after having Jiselle and learning that lesson, it's made life with the other two a little bit easier, in terms of like, I don't really have any expectations in terms of this is how it needs to go, or these are the sports they need to be enrolled in, or this are the clubs they need to do at school. It's more of like, this is my kid. I'm going to love him and her for whatever they choose to do or be in their life, and be as supportive as I can be, because all this other stuff, it doesn't always really matter. And I just want them to know that they're loved.
Absolutely. Take anything away. Just know that you're loved.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for other parents, maybe other parents who have a child with special needs?
That's such a hard one, because everybody's situation is so different. And just say, find the joy. Like, I could come off pretty positive, but it's still like, things are hard. Like, now we're dealing with, she doesn't want to stand up all the way, or she's slouching in her chair. So now I have to go get a hip x-ray and like maybe some more equipment. And, it's like it's just always a bump in the road. So it's like, find the joy, or find the things that make you happy. Because if you're not happy, you express that to your children, I feel like, in any situation.
Yeah. Well, like for anyone in life, life isn't about smooth sailing.
I think it like took me a while to like really learn that. So
also another thing we just learn, I think, on a daily basis I don't know if that's one you ever really totally master.
No.
Well, looking forward down the road, what are your thoughts on the future? Are there things that you're looking forward to for Jiselle or for your entire family?
I mean, the future is like kind of scary with Jiselle because she's always going to have help, and she's only going to get bigger and stronger and heavier. And, um, it's scary and overwhelming to think about how to manage that. And then, like we'll never really ever be empty nesters. So, how do we keep her diagnosis and her limitations or challenges physically from inhibiting us doing things that we wanted to do in the future? So the future with her is a little scary, but the future is also exciting in the sense that the sky's the limit for her. Like if she puts her mind to it, like she can have a full conversation or write a book on her talker. Like doing fun things with my kids. We're really trying to not let her diagnosis inhibit what we want to do in life. So like in March, we're gonna go to Mexico for spring break. And like that's like a huge deal. One, in a COVID world, but two, like, like she's on a strict diet. How are we going to handle that? How are we going to get the equipment on the airplane without breaking it? How making sure that we have everything she needs to be successful, not at home. So there's just a lot in the future to think about. But on the other hand, the future is also exciting.
Well, I like that you brought up just thinking about how it will impact you in the long term, you and your husband, physically to be able to manage those
Yeah.
needs emotionally, because that's a long term. Most kids leave.
Yeah, like what happens at 18 when she's out of high school? And I know they have like a longer term program, but what happens when she's out of that and has nothing to do during the day? Like, how do you keep her moving and engaged? And, like, I don't really want to put her in a home. So, but maybe that's where she wants to be. Like, there's all this stuff to think because she wants to live independently, right? So, like, there's all this stuff to think about that can just like take up so much energy in my head. And I'm such a forward thinker that it's really, I try to just live like this is the next month or two that I have to get through.
Yeah, I think about that too. My son is 10 now, and I'm like, that just feels so close to 18 all of a sudden, like it's like a milestone. And I've been thinking about that too, because I don't know, the more kids you have, the faster things tend to go because you're busy. So it's definitely something that's been on my mind. And I think that just like bringing it up today, us having a discussion about it, like gives other people permission to not about thinking about it, because yeah, it's just something to consider.
What's overwhelming and like, I don't know, like I want to travel with my husband, just us. Like, how do we do that when one of our children isn't 100% independent and needs somebody to help them all the time? And then do you trust that person? Because, Jiselle right now can't tell us, but hopefully in the future she could tell us that she was mistreated or whatever. I mean, there's so much to think about with things that should be simple in life, right? Because you have extra challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And like traveling, have you guys gone on a trip before besides Mexico?
We have. We can drive to the beach where we're from. It's like an 8-hour trip to the panhandle of Florida. So we go to the beach all the time, and that's like a pretty easy trip because you can take food and there's a grocery store and we have our car. We've only flown once. It was when she was 4, right before Disney shut down for the COVID, and we took them to Disney on an airplane, and that was like pretty easy. But now we're 2 or 3 years down the road, and she's bigger, and her needs are a little bit different. So it's just like a whole like, I don't know. I get a little anxious thinking about spring break because it's a lot. But I'm determined to go and figure it out, because once you figure it out, it makes the subsequent trips so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's all like you're saying, you just ride the wave and take it. Trips, might need to take it like minute by minute instead of day.
Exactly.
But I think you guys are going to have a blast, and it's going to just create a bunch of family. Well, I want to topics a little bit and hear about your foundation that you created. It was inspired by Jiselle.
Yeah. So Back in 2019, I guess the conversation started. Bailey was like, how cool we're a golfing family. So my dad golfs, his dad golfs, Bailey golfs. I grew up golfing. It just runs through our blood. He's like, how cool would it be to like have a golf tournament in Jiselle's name and kind of memorialize her and have a legacy for her, and raise money for special needs kids. And so like morphed into this whole, why don't we just start a foundation where we raise money and grant it out to families who need income, because we've been so lucky through insurance and now through the Katie Beckett program that just started here in Tennessee to get what we need to, let Jiselle live her best life. And we quickly realized like not everybody is that lucky. So it was our way of doing something in her name and for her needs that gives back to others to help maybe make them feel like life's a little bit easier because their kid can live life to their fullest potential.
Does Jiselle understand anything about the foundation?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we talk to her about it all the time. It's like a daily conversation in our house, just between Bailey and I sometimes. So all of our kids have picked up a little bit on it.
That's cool. And I think I saw a picture of her in like a walker.
Yes. She has a gait trainer, but she's not independently using it. It's more of just a piece of equipment to help her continue to gain strength in walking and not lose the ability of lifting her leg and placing it down.
Did she get to go with you guys on your golfing outings?
She doesn't, because they're on Mondays and she's usually in school. So school is very important. It's like the best place for her in my eyes. So
yeah, if they were on vacation for too long, things don't go so well.
No, we're kind of dealing with that now. So we had like 2 weeks of winter break, and then when we get snow here, everything shuts down. So we had snow last week, and she just they went back to school on Wednesday, and then we had snow for the next 2 days. And so this is her first week of being back in school full time, and she definitely has to gain the strength back to do that.
Yeah, I think I saw something on one of your Instagram posts about her having a fatigue, right?
Yes. So her body just fatigues very easily. It works hard to like sit her up. And so you try to give her as much support when she's doing things like eating or working with her eye gaze device so that her body's calm. She can focus her attention on the other muscles that help her do the task that she's doing.
Okay. So what do you guys have, how do people work with your foundation?
So everything's volunteer based right now. Like we don't pay anybody. So we just try to raise funds throughout the year to be able to grant them out towards the end of the year to families. So we just finished our second grant process. And I think we granted out somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 to families who need therapy or equipment or want to try something not covered by insurance. It was definitely a challenging year in that we had over triple the amount of funds being requested than last year. So we obviously weren't able to fulfill them all because we're still growing. Like we're still trying to raise enough funds to be able to help everybody that needs help.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any background in this kind of work?
So my husband and I both have CPAs and have done accounting and finance our whole careers. So we have background in the sense that we can run something and understand a P&L and a balance sheet and all the financial things and tax forms. But we don't necessarily have all the experience in raising funds. So we're still working through learning that. But again, it's a journey. Every day is just like you learn something new. So
definitely. Has the foundation become like a job for you, or is it something you do on the side?
It's become a job, but it's a part-time job. I can only get to it when I have the free time to get to it, which is kind of hard. Because of course I'd like it to be a full-time job, but I'm not obviously getting paid for. So right now, because life is so crazy with Jiselle and my other kids, it's more of, okay, what's going to fit into my schedule this week to kind of keep this thing moving along.
Mm-hmm. That's so exciting. It sounds like you guys have made a huge impact. And do you only work with families? I think I read just in Tennessee.
No, we work with families all over the country. So our first year, we were able to grant money to a little girl in India who has Rett syndrome, and get an eye gaze device. So there's no limit on diagnosis. There's no limit on where you are. We try to do what we can, obviously, in the U.S., but we're worldwide too. So,
Do you guys have any goals down the road of like how
I
much?
mean, I think our goal is just how can we increase our donor base this year? How can we, increase the money in the bank almost so that we can grant out more? We're kind of unique in that like we have really low overhead costs. So we try to grant out as much as we can outside of what we need to maybe run an event or two during the year. And obviously our small overhead costs.
That's really cool. So other than your foundation, you guys have probably had other resources that have helped you along the way. You mentioned the Katie Beckett Foundation. Would you like to share?
It's a Katie Beckett program. So I think it's in most states, but it's a government run program where people who earn more money than needed, like we don't qualify for Medicaid basically because our income levels are too high. So it's for those families who are like us, can apply and be accepted after an approval process. And basically, depending if you're in Part A or Part B, you get different, benefits.
Mhm.
So it's been really helpful.
Yeah, I have not heard of that, so I don't know if it's where I am or not. But
I would assume California seems to have great benefits that it should be there. I don't know. I feel like Tennessee was one of the last states.
Every parent that comes on will say something I've never heard of, a Facebook page, a
You
foundation.
just learn something new all the time.
I love it. And if I haven't heard of it, then most likely the listeners have.
No.
Sharing the good news. Resources that you would like to mention?
Anyone who has a daughter with Rett syndrome or a son, I think they're aware of like rettsyndrome.org, or I think they changed their name, or Girl Power to Cure, Rett Syndrome Research Trust. Those are kind of the big organizations that we like to support in our mission, because part of our mission states that we give back to organizations for Jiselle's diagnosis. And obviously those are the resources that we tap into. We tap into heavy like Rett University, which is the communication organization, just because that's actually been like the biggest help. So we work weekly with them, not as a foundation, but as parents and Jiselle to work on her communication.
Perfect. I'll definitely put those in the show notes.
Yeah.
Is there a misconception that you might want to clear up about Rett syndrome or special needs children?
Yeah, I think it's still presumed competence. I think that's the biggest one. Because her body might not look like she's engaged, but she's super engaged and can take in everything she's seen or doing, which is, to someone who doesn't know, looks different than to people who have special needs kids who understand that, not everybody's body works the way that ours do.
Do you guys, because she's probably in a wheelchair, more observable disability, do you have a lot of interaction when you go out in the community with people?
No, but you catch other kids staring at her, and that's always hard. Even though kids are great, like she's at this age where like they don't really see any different, and like she loves being around her peers and her peers love being around her, and she's super social. It still kills you as a parent to like visibly see somebody trying to figure out why your kid's different or what's wrong with them.
Do you normally like take the initiative to have that conversation? I know that can be.
If somebody asks, I will. But I don't go over to somebody's table at a restaurant and be like, hey, I see you staring at my kid. Like, here's what's up.
That's a little crossing the line.
I'm not that like coming. I'm just like, oh well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I wouldn't do that either.
I don't know. I'm sure some people would.
Are there any other questions that you or things that you'd like to discuss that maybe we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I feel like you covered it all. We talked about the foundation. We have a website. We're on social media. Check us out. It's the Jisellle Lauren Foundation.org. And our handles are obviously the Jisellle Lauren Foundation. And then I was sharing family stuff on there, but I broke off and started my own account on Instagram, which is Pratt_party of 5. Just kind of share our journey because I would love to create just a community of special needs parents who just can lean on each other, not feel so alone. So it feels like a very alone journey sometimes, especially in our case, where not a lot of people in the area have what Jiselle has. Like that's been, I think, hard. Just feeling kind of alone in the journey, and not alone in the sense like people aren't supportive of us and like care. More alone is just like you feel like you're going through this journey by yourself.
Yeah. Well, with people that really like have the Rett syndrome, understand exactly what you're going through, even though it's that just really get it. I know that's like a benefit of having a diagnosis. Like you can connect with that group instead of just being like developmental delay or something, you know?
But I also had to be careful because I was like, well, why are they walking and my kids not? Like I'd start doing that. So I was like, I need to pull back and just figure out what my journey looks like and understand how I can go through this journey in a happy way, or I could lean on others for support.
Definitely. That sounds like a wonderful thing to be doing for your Instagram to grow that community. I am trying to do something similar. And I've talked to a few mamas lately that are really involved in the special needs community. So I think that we're really growing and creating those communities out there and creating a big network. You know, there's so many.
I think it's great. Or just to educate other people on what our lives look like compared to what people typically think of a typical family. Like our lives are so different. Our house is like full of equipment everywhere. Just just have different challenges we have to like get through having a special needs kid. So, and everybody has the hard, right? Like, I think that's one thing with our foundation. Like, it doesn't matter what the hard is, it's all hard in its own way. Like having a child that's not on the path that you expected them to be on.
Yes, we had a really hard weekend a few weeks ago, or like 1.5 weeks ago. I'm trying to put distance between it.
Yeah, I understand.
I kept thinking, I think I've done some work for myself on like how I think about things. And part of me was trying to say like how awful it was. And I'm like, no, because I think I have the perspective now. It was just difficult. It wasn't like terrible, the worst weekend ever. It was just a challenging weekend. And it required you to pull back and, just focus on minute by minute, hour by hour. Like we were talking about when things get a little tense and challenging, you just have to.
Yeah. And I do the same thing. Like it could always be worse. Like my child could be on their deathbed. Like to me, that would be worse. And she's not. So like we spent a week in the hospital for the first time after fall break. And that was, I think the situation was so stressful that I didn't necessarily deal with the feelings until after the fact. But I'm like, even that situation could have been worse than what it was. And the worst part was just dealing with the doctors. I think that's the other, like going back to your questions about parenting, like, your kid better than anybody else. Like I trust doctors. I get where they're coming from, but like, they don't see my kid every day. And in that specific case, I felt like she's being judged on the worst time of her life, like the worst week she's ever had. And so like growth from that definitely occurred.
Definitely. Has she been in the hospital much?
No, that was like the first time she'd been in the hospital, ever had like an issue or concern. They think she aspirated. We don't know when it happened or how it happened, but they're basically being like, she needs to be on a feeding tube and not ever eat again. We're like, but wait,
back it up.
Yeah, like we work with a feeding therapist. Her first swallow study says she wasn't aspirating. The feeding therapist sees her weekly without any concerns that she thinks she's aspirating. And you're basically going to give her, like, pull the plug on her being able to have independence with food.
Mhm.
Like, it was very challenging for me.
So was it pretty, how was that process for you to advocate for them to reconsider and, or just to say,
So, like, I don't really like getting stuck in the middle of challenges at all. But like, as the week went on in the hospital and she was laying in that bed and not getting up, like, things like were deteriorating to me in terms of her energy. And I'm like, she needs to get out of here. Like, we've been in here, she's getting better. She's eating something, stuff by mouth. Like, what do we do to need to get out of here? And so, like, having those conversations are definitely challenging because I don't ever want to make somebody mad. But at the same time, like, you have to, you know, what's best for your kid. And what was best for her was to get her home. And it was like, she perked right up. She, you know, was eating well again and happy and just like happy to be home. So
yeah. And once you decide it's time to leave the hospital, it takes a while to get out the door.
well, I was going through hoops because I think, I mean, as they should have, that we were not in denial that she was safe and not going to have to be back in the hospital, which I get. But at the same time, like, again, you don't know my child on a daily basis was what I was really struggling with.
So she's been home for a little while now and is doing better.
Yeah, she's been home. She's great. She passed her other swallow study, which I'd be like, booyah. See, I told you.
You knew.
Yeah, like, you just, I feel like you have, you know, in your gut, and this is just hard. It is a hard situation to deal. Like, that was the first real hard situation to deal with.
And was your husband able to be there with you at all since you have the other kids and
Yeah,
COVID?
so he works from home regardless, and he's been kind of like grounded from traveling since COVID broke out. So he was like, I'll stay with her in the hospital and not leave her because I can work from there and it's quiet while you wrangle and figure out the other two. So that was just a hard week. We had just come back from Disney, so we were all exhausted. Literally the next day she went to the emergency room and didn't come home till the next Friday. So it's just a lot of figuring out the kids, figuring out where they needed to be, being able to go to Vanderbilt to check on everybody. And then not being with her was hard too. I think I had a lot of mom guilt, but at the end of the day, I think that was the best situation for our family to be able to function.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm really glad to hear she is well and able to come home and keep feeding and doing her thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully you guys stay well away from the hospital going forward. It was a one-time.
I hope so. I hope so. But
Well,
then you also have like the reality of like, this could happen again. Like with Rett syndrome, like, you have seizures, and we've been really lucky not to see much of that or any of that. So like, again, it could always be worse.
course. Well, I hope that she stays really well, especially during this winter season. You guys still have snow. We don't deal with that here, but
No, we had snow. It's gone now, but we're supposed to like get 6 to 10 inches on Sunday, which is not normal. So we will be shut down and stuck inside.
did they get to go out and play? Did she do okay with cold weather though?
She doesn't do great with the heat. I'm not quite sure how she does, with the cold, because we don't, I mean, like, we get snow like once a year. So we'll see. We'll probably get her out in it because I got some sleds finally.
Oh.
But we'll see.
It's so random. There's a little antique store we drive through on the way to drop off one of my kids, and they have like an old sled. And I'm like, I don't know why. I just feel compelled to buy it. How much is that?
Right? I mean, I guess it is winter, even though like your weather is probably like spring here.
I'm sure my kids would be like sledding down the dirt in their backyard. They would find something to do with it. They're crazy.
I love it.
Well, I think that's all I have for you today. Would you prefer that listeners connect with you through your Instagrams? Is that the best?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. It does. I mean, you can sign up for our email list on our website. Anyone can ask any questions if they have them, or, follow our journey, follow the foundation. Just getting the word out is where we're at. So
awesome. Well, I wish you guys continued success and
thank you. Same to you.
Going forward this year. And thank you so much for your time, Jill. It was great meeting you.
It was so nice to meet you. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.